Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe and
I'm Mike Rice.
And today, Mike, we are celebrating our 100th episode of Coast FC. Woo!
We didn't get any sound effects in, I realized.
No sound effects or visual effects. Clearly, we're going to probably need another 100 episodes to figure out how to do all that editing.
Anyone that's actually listening, can you just hit that back 30 seconds bit and then just big round of applause as Felipe mentions it?
Exactly, that'd be great. Useful. Maybe we could use it for next one. But yeah, it's our 100th episode. We've been doing it for 100 episodes now, and very exciting. It's a historical moment for us, and coincidentally, in this episode, we're going to talk about some other historical moments that have happened across CPL, including a historical win for a certain CPL team in a Concacaf Champions Cup. We're going to be covering all of the action that happened across all 4 games in the Champions Cup for both Cavalry and Forge, and talk about what went right and unfortunately what did go wrong, as both of them did get knocked out, but not without a hell of a fight, especially for Cavalry. We will also obviously be talking about transfer news, because we love to talk about transfer news on Coast to Coast. We're going to talk about some of the big transfer news, some of the ones that may have slipped through the cracks for fellow listeners, and what maybe to make of them before we close out talking about the fixtures. Finally, the CPL season fixtures are out. It's starting to feel like the CPL season is back in business again after so many months away. And we'll even talk about the Canadian Championship in the first round, and maybe some of the matchups are going to be surprising for us in that one. It's going to be an action-packed episode. Before we dive into everything, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as finding us on YouTube under the same name. But Mike, to kick off our 100th episode, let's talk about the massive, massive tie that was Cavalry against Pumas, because as we thought when the tie originally came out, it was going to be a tough task for both CPL sides, facing big historic Mexican opposition. Obviously more recently I think you could say Monterrey, definitely bigger than Pumas, but Pumas is still no minnow in the Mexican league.
They've been around a little while, haven't they, and had some success.
Yeah, they've been around a little while. But yeah, let's start off with Cavalry and leg 1, because let's be honest, that's the one that everyone wants to talk about. So let's give them what they want and talk about leg 1, and that was the 2-1 victory. Unfortunately, it wasn't at Atco Field due to weather restrictions. Imagine if that win would have been at Atco Field, just knowing how the win was against Forge in the CPL final.
Exactly.
I can only imagine how that would have been, with a continental competition. But unfortunately, they had to do it in Langford, in Starlight Stadium, the home of Pacific FC. But nevertheless, it's still a historic win for Cavalry. And it looked like Cavalry were there to play from the first minute, really. Obviously, as you could expect from both Mexican sides in the first leg, didn't feel the strongest of teams. Compared to maybe what they were playing in the domestic league. Mexican teams, there are about 8 or 9 games into the season at this point, so they have to deal with rotation and stuff like that, and obviously they're going to be treating these games maybe not as highly as some of the other games, at least in leg 1, because they were both away. So we didn't see the strongest of teams from Cavalry in this one. Or not Cavalry, from Pumas in this one. We did see a very strong Cavalry team come out. Obviously, the first time that we're seeing Cavalry play without Dan Klump in the lineup. We saw Cal Montgomery and Eric Kubza line up as the pair of center backs. But Mike, what did you make of the first leg, and especially like the first half or so, because we had to wait a little while for Cavalry to really get the goals going, but it wasn't like Pumas were all over them. They were making a good show for themselves throughout the game.
Yeah, I think you've got to really give credit to the whole club, the way they've kept this team together. Obviously, the loss of Dan Klomp's huge, but the rest of the squad is already there. They've brought back Jay Herdman, who we can talk about more in this second leg.
Yeah.
But they've got an understanding. They've got a deep roster. They know it's not like there's still big changes going on behind that starting 11 either. They've got those players all set up. The squad, the team know what they're doing, and it gives them the best chance. I mean, we'll say this every year, like CPL teams are going in without preseason. Like this is, they're always at this big disadvantage just to be match fit, let alone the financial and historic disadvantages that may come with being a new league. But having that 11 that you got put out there with players who are recognizable Cavalry players, really. And Eric obviously did fantastic. Obviously, such a great first year. Second season was just more of a bit part player, I think. Just had to take a little step back and sort of organize himself within the squad. And he looks ready to take that step again. And losing Dan Klump, I think he really did shine. There's like, okay, he's not a like for like replacement, but he's got a great future in this club and he's a good centre back. So it made you feel really confident about Cavalry. And in that first half, it just showed, like you can only play the team that gets put out in front of you. People say, well, we comment, and others may as well, about the 11 that Pumas chose, but they're out there. They're professional football players. It's not like they've just brought their mates along for a game. These are professional players from Pumas who are looking to have a career in the MX. So it was a great way to start the tie, and you just really felt. I just felt really confident, really happy for Cavalry as they went out there, because going out from such a long break and to be able to step into it again looked. I mean, that teams around the CPL must have been looking at it going, "Oh shit, they're ready."
Yeah, no, definitely. Like you mentioned, like a lot of these players this is their first match just in general. Like they had a preseason. We know that they went down to Mexico and both teams played, but like this was their first real test, and it was against Mexican giants. Like this is no small feat, and especially for, like you mentioned, Eric Kabza, Kabza and Montgomery as a center back pairing. This was like a trial by fire.
Yeah,
because we didn't know what Cavalry was going to look like defensively without Dan Klump. He's been such a presence for them for the last few years. So it was a huge test for them, and they responded not even admirably, like beyond like comprehension. Like the fact that they won in their first competitive match against Pumas, who are in mid-season, is just like it's a fairy tale. And I think everybody's reaction to it was exactly that, in the way that they won it as well. We talk through the goals quickly. Pumas did start the goals. They led first with a goal from fellow Canadian, dual national, Mexican Canadian, Santi Lopez, who has been a star for the youth national team in Canada for quite a while. So nice for him from a Canadian point of view to get a goal. Unfortunately, had to come against Canadian opposition. But then the second half came in, because I was right at the end of the first half. Second half came in, Cavalry, they could have just kind of dipped, but they persevered. They kept going. And they came out confident, and they came out fighting. And Pumas, maybe it was because of the weather and the conditions, but just didn't really look all that at it. And then we got the first goal from Charlie Trafford, a fantastic whipped corner right into the middle of the box. I don't know what the defense or the goalkeeper was doing. They were all statues.
Yeah.
Just statues. Nobody moved. I was like, I don't know who to blame, the goalie, because it was right at the top of his goalie box, or the defense for not moving at all. But Charlie Trafford just saw an open lane, ran towards it, and had enough time and space to side foot it into the back of the net. Fantastic goal. And I can only imagine. I obviously was in Colombia. I was unable to be there live. If not, I would definitely have made the trip to Victoria for the game. But the atmosphere and everything there, the way that it popped and everything, it seemed like it was, obviously a momentous occasion, a fantastic goal, but it did not compare, let's be honest, to the second goal, where Tobias Wachowski made his greatest Dennis Bergkamp impression in that second goal, where the cross came in. Jay Herdman did very well to get the ball down, pass it to to Tobias Wachowski, who did a deft little flick to get around his marker and immediately with the same foot volley it into the back of the net for a superb goal. That's probably going to be like a Hall of Fame goal
Yeah.
for Cavalry in the years to come, just because of the occasion and just the skill required. That would have been a wonder goal in regular league play, but the fact that it was the winning goal against Pumas in the Concacaf Champions Cup to have the first CPL team win a match in the Concacaf Champions Cup. I mean, you couldn't write that. That's just as fairy tale as you can get, and a very deserved result from Cavalry overall. The grit and determination that they showed in that first half was supreme, and it really gave you a lot of confidence. It's like, hey, maybe they can go to Mexico and potentially get something. The way that they played, obviously, Pumas probably will field a bit of a stronger team, knowing that they're like, oh wait, we can actually get out of this, and we want to go far.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's in Mexico, which everyone knows, a very volatile atmosphere for away fans and just for the away team in general. But to have that kind of first leg performance, I mean, did you feel going into the second game, Mike, that Cavalry could maybe provide the double upset and eliminate Pumas and go to the next round?
Yeah, I mean, you get carried away. I mean, when you see that finish from Wachowski, you get carried away. It's like like watching him go on a run through this competition just as you get overwhelmed by that. But they certainly they going behind and fighting back, playing the same, like playing to a game plan throughout the 90 minutes and not reacting to Puma. They had their plan and they knew what they were doing, and it worked. That game it worked, and I had the confidence. You look at that team now, and they're not looking at a big opposition going, oh God, how are we going to deal with them? They look like they went out and said, right, this is how we're going to try and win this game. And I think that's what is the biggest change in what you'll see from CPL sides going up against big teams now. Like as the seasons go on, them becoming much more confident in going out with their game plan rather than just trying to cope with the oppositions.
Yeah, and I do feel like Mexican opposition are taking note of that. I think, especially after the results, because I know after this loss, a lot of people, a lot of Mexican fans were gunning for the head coach's job. They're like, and One Soccer even did like a whole little piece, like a social media piece on the fact that they were saying, like, I think his name was Gustavo Lema, and like Lema out or Lema fuera or whatever. And One Soccer kind of jumped in on that. But I think, yeah, Mexican opposition are starting to notice, like, hey, maybe like CPL sides deserve a little bit more respect now that the CPL side has won, because Cavalry will be forever first, the CPL side, to beat a Mexican opposition in CONCACAF Champions Cup, and just in general to win a game in Champions Cup in the CPL. But they're not going to be the last. And I feel like with especially Mexican opposition, because I think it'd be different if they face a Costa Rican side or a Guatemalan side or a Honduran side, where you could say it's a little bit more level. But the fact that it was against a Mexican opposition, a Mexican giant, shows that CPL in general has to be taken a little bit more seriously from a continental point of view. I know that the league is still young and everything, but it's these kinds of results that really show, hey, Canadians can play football, and it's not just the stars that are in Europe. It's like there are players here at home that are willing to, fight and bleed and sweat for the badge and for their country, and be able to pull out results like they did in this first leg. And even if in the second leg, moving on to the second leg, it didn't end up exactly as they wanted it to, they still put on a really good performance, because they had to play 45 minutes with 10 men because of the red card. And there were really red cards in the game, which, let's talk about it, because the first one was a red card that was initially given to Charlie Trafford for a presumed dangerous tackle, when really it was just two players diving for the ball, and just Charlie Trafford came a little bit later and got a cleat to the guy's thigh. It wasn't like, it was, I guess you could say, dangerous, but it wasn't intentional. It was just a 50-50 challenge
Yeah.
that, like, I feel like it was the right decision to bump that back down to a yellow card. I don't think it was a red card offense. And I feel like when you're looking at it, especially in the replay, obviously slow motion is going to make it look worse, but even in slow motion, it
Yeah.
didn't look that bad as to be like, oh, that's a red card. You would just say, oh, that's an unfortunate 50-50 challenge.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's difficult in the world of VAR where then it's going into, well, we can't argue whether which one's the harsher one, or which tackle, like where does it get to where it hurts a certain amount. Or yeah, there is that difficulty that referees have got. And when it happened, when I first saw it, like the Pumas midfielder, I thought like he threw himself in as well. So at first I thought from the camera angle he saw, I was like, oh God, is he going to go off? And then you see the replay, it's like, oh God, yeah, Trafford's feet are up a bit. And I'm with you. Like I agree, it's a yellow card. Like at best, like it definitely didn't deserve a red. We're just in that difficult time, aren't we, where referees aren't 100% sure the laws aren't exactly clear enough for them to give each time. So yeah, it's just one of those weird ones, but I'm glad it didn't result in a red.
Yeah, and Cavalry thought that they were saved from a red card and having to play with 10 men. But they only were able to do that for a little while, because at the end of the first half, we saw a challenge from Jay Herdman, who did so well in the first leg, not even just with the assist for Tobias Swarchowski, but just in general. He was one of like the top performers for me in the first leg. And also, he's been great for Cavalry ever since he came in.
Yeah.
He did not the greatest of challenges inside the box. And initially,
tackle, isn't it?
yeah. Initially, the referee didn't even call for a penalty or anything, just let play go on. Then went back to VAR, they looked at it in slow motion and deemed it not only a foul and therefore a penalty, but a double jeopardy with the red card. Now, this was definitely the most controversial moment because for me, yes, Jay does catch the Mexican player relatively high up with this cleat, but it feels like it's only like a scratch. Like it feels like he glances off. It doesn't dig all his cleats into the player's leg that you usually see with red cards, a dangerous tackle, where you see like a stamp on the player's like calf or quad or thigh there. It wasn't to that level. And so for me, I look at it like, yeah, it's a penalty. I'd give that as a penalty, 100%. I don't think there's any real contention that it's a penalty. But a red card as well? And this day and age where, like, I feel like the game in general is trying to promote not having that case of double jeopardy of the red card and the penalty. Really? Does that deserve a red card? I personally don't think so. I think that was extremely harsh on Jay Herdman. And the fact that the referee was confident enough to give a red card after his last red card got bumped down to yellow, I just felt like the referee, I don't know. The referee may have been a little bit trigger happy. What about you? Did you think it was a red card offense?
I kind of did. I mean, because I've been growing up like here, just constantly watching Premier League as well in England. Like those tackles are given, and like there's the argument. Well, if we don't give it because he hasn't hurt him that much, then it's difficult to get that border of where and when it becomes a red card. As much as as a massive fan of the CPL wanted it to be a yellow at best, I do kind of see why it was given. I think if there's anywhere else on the pitch, it would have been given. I think if it was the opposition fouling a CPL, like one of the Cavalry players, I would have been screaming for a red card. So I will give the ref a bit of credit on that. I know, yeah, it is really hard to take, but from my personal standpoint, I do get it. I hate it, but I get it.
Fair enough. That's the case with with red cards, and especially in this day and age. A lot of them are very contentious. A lot of them you can have different perspectives and explanations for it. You know, in the end, it's always going to be a subjective call from what the referee.
And that's the biggest problem of VAR. Like the idea of it's fantastic, but there's so much that isn't black and white, and that's what makes it so difficult.
Exactly. And that's why we're always going to have those conversations about VAR. And I'm sure if CPL ever gets VAR, even though we've had many conversations about wanting VAR, I'm sure as soon as it comes in, we'll have many conversations of why it's difficult, why it's not great, and why it has issues. Just the reality of things.
Exactly.
But yes, Cavalry did get, in the end, that red card, and it looked to be from bad to worse. Because Pusetto, the Pumas player, stepped up to take the penalty. And I will be 100% honest. When I saw it, I thought 1-0. I thought, look, I know Pusetto like a bit. I have seen him play a little bit. And I know that he's like a decent player. And him stepping up to a penalty and just the odds of a penalty in general, I think they're probably scoring this. When Marco Carducci makes that stop, I felt like time stopped. I was in shock. I could not believe that he had stopped that penalty. It was, I feel like that penalty stop won't be as high up there as obviously Wachowski's goal, but still, that is going to be a historical moment for Cavalry, because what a moment. Like, your team goes down to 10 men, you know, you're right like at the halfway point of the game. You have this 2-1 lead. If they score, you basically have to score again because of the away goals rule that is still in effect and everything. And he comes up with that massive save, and knowing who Marco is and like what he means to Cavalry and everything. It was such a beautiful moment for him and for the club, and it was so hype. I remember, like, basically after the shock wore off, just like being so hyped that did not go in.
My reactions went the complete opposite, because I was just exactly like you, like, oh, okay, 1-0, like, and I was almost looking away, just expecting it to just be back in the back of the net, and just like, oh, okay, game's gone. And I was sort of almost in the corner of my eye seeing it happen, and I must have screamed louder than I did for a Wachowski goal, just because, like, oh my god, this is incredible, the game's still on. It's absolutely, usually I'm quite calm watching it, it's like fantastic, oh, brilliant save, Marco. But this took me to new levels of excitement.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it was emotional for sure. It was an emotional moment for everybody. That penalty save was massive for Marco, and then halftime struck, and then you really felt like, okay, they got 10 men. Now the anxiety kicks in. Can they hold on to it for 45 minutes? In the end, they were unable to, because Pumas, with quality and the budget they have, were able to call upon their bench and bring in some really good players, including obviously Guillermo Martinez, who they brought in at halftime for Santi Lopez, who wasn't able to do the damage and the impact that he did in the first leg. But Martinez did. He came in and scored 2 goals. One, a very nice header off a cross, and the other one, a long-range scorcher.
Yeah.
To really put the game to bed. And even though it was 2-0, credit to Cavalry, they kept fighting. They kept fighting all the way until the very end. Ali Musi had a pretty decent chance in added time to try to claw one back, push it to extra time, but was unable to. But, you know, valiant effort from Cavalry. They can be so proud. And the fact that they are going to be frustrated and disappointed that they weren't able to see the result only goes to show how far the CPL and the team itself, Cavalry, have come in, you know, in the context of Continental. Because when you're thinking about CPL, you're always thinking about within the context of the CPL. You're not really comparing it to other things. But now we have something that we can compare it to arguably the top league in Concacaf, right? Right up there with MLS. So it's a fantastic, you know, showing, even if the results didn't go their way across both legs. The fact that they got that win, the fact that they gave it absolutely their all, and Pumas had to essentially scrape through.
Yeah. Against 10 men for 45 minutes.
Against Head for 45
it wasn't
minutes.
just Moosey's chance. There were others. They got forward. They tried to trouble them. It was really impressive.
Yeah, no, fantastic from Cavalry, and I'm very excited to see what they have in store for us in the league once that starts in a couple of months. But now let's move on to the other CPL side that got into some CONCACAF action the last 2 weeks, and that was, of course, regular Shield winners, Forge FC. Now, unfortunately for them, they were not able to have the highs that Cavalry had.
No.
In their tie. Admittedly, they did have a tougher opponent, as we mentioned, against Monterrey. Rayados are one of the best teams in Liga MX right now, currently, and have been for a while as well. Massive, massive side. And unfortunately for Forge, where Cavalry were able to beat them was not even just in effort or in the way that they played. It's just putting their chances away. Because if we're talking about leg one, first half, the amount of chances that Forge had, and not even just in the first half, but like the first one, it hurts the most for me. That Brian Wright chance where Lily rolls right in front of him. I still don't understand why he didn't have a touch. It looked like he was just shocked that the ball was right in front of him, and he didn't react until the ball was past him. But that would have been such a huge goal for them to be able to go 1-0 up in that first half, and we know how Forge are. Once they get that lead, once they get that that mojo going, they're a very, very tough side to break. They got that experience, they have the mentality. Just needed that go-ahead goal to really cement themselves as like, okay, we can win this game, and they were unable to do that. Second half came, and a pair of really good goals from Monterrey. I mean, that long-range strike that beat Coilalat, I don't think anybody could really have saved that. It was such a powerful, well-placed shot. And then an even better, I'd say, free kick to make it to just... at that point, you got to feel like 2-0 away from home. Monterrey pretty much have got it.
Yeah.
Again, credit to Forge. They kept fighting, and at the very end, another massive chance. Ashinori Johnson at the back post. The ball trajectory, I think it took a deflection on the way to the back post. He couldn't get a good connection on it and sends it wide with the goal gaping. Had those two goals gone in, we're talking 2-2 and a chance for Forge in the second leg. But 2-0 down, going to Mexico, it was always going to be a tough task. Did you feel like it was a fair result in leg one for Forge, or did you feel like Forge deserved more based on those chances they had?
Yeah, that's tough. They did create those chances, and they did really well to do that. And I'm trying to take my sort of anti-Forge bias out of things in a CPL moment because they are representing the league there. But I got concerned, and I will sometimes it's easier to judge Forge quicker than it is other teams. And maybe I did at first, but I got straight away worried. It's like, right, okay, you've bought the Brian Wright from that was goal shy rather than the one that was in form. And but again, that's being overly harsh because this is the beginning of the year for them. They're playing probably one of the favourites to win the whole tournament. So to actually get into those positions and to continually deal with and provide a threat was really good. I thought Tristan Borges was great throughout these two throughout this tournament as well. He really showed the bits where he could be one of those players who could be a difference maker to really take an underdog and worry one of the big dogs. It's those moments he got, and he was fighting for him. It wasn't just luck of the bounce got you through and he had a go. He was fighting for those opportunities. They were working hard, but they just seemed a bit slower. Which you're going to Monterrey in the season. They are who they are, and it was just hard for them to keep up after a while, I felt. And yes, it's the time of year. It's really difficult. The fact that they were, that bench in the first leg, Like they weren't ready, like as a squad, like as a whole team, they weren't ready for CONCACAF coming round, and that was a bit of a problem for them as well. So they had those little extra parts to deal with as well, but they did great. But you can't look past Monterrey in either of those ties. They were the deserved winners, but yeah, that's not to be overly harsh. They are Monterrey.
No, exactly. They are who they are, and I mean, you look at their lineup. They had so many players that people will just recognize. I mean,
Exactly.
they had Oliver Torres, who was played for Porto, played for Atletico Madrid. They had Hector Moreno, like one of Mexico's best ever center backs, at least in recent history. Arteaga is another great defender as well that they had. They also had on the bench, they had Sergio Canales, who any La Liga fan and anybody who knows the La Liga knows, like, he is a fantastic player. And those are just a few of like the good star players that they had on offer. And when you have that kind of quality, if you don't put your chances away against like one of the best teams in the continent, you're gonna suffer for it. And that's unfortunately, I think, the biggest lesson that Forge had. And like, yeah, you mentioned, like, you look at the bench that they had, and they managed to bring in some players. Obviously, we'll talk about transfers later, but like Charlie Payton from Scotland came in. But you look, they had to have so many like young players on like an emergency developmental contract come in, and or not emergency, but like a developmental contract can come in and help them out to fill out the squad. Like, yeah, it wasn't as deep as we saw, and it's similar to what happened to them honestly last season as well. When they faced, was it Chivas that they faced?
Yeah,
last season.
yeah. Colongo got his debut in goal.
Yeah, Colongo got his debut. It wasn't the same there as, I think it was Tavernier that got the goal as well. Kevon Tavernier got his first goal in the away leg. They had a lot of young players there on the bench as well. It feels like Forge, just weren't necessarily as prepared as maybe they would have wanted to be at that point in time, but they still gave it a good effort. They still had those flashes, those chances in the first leg, and like you mentioned, Borges did really well. Talk about the second leg too. Borges was the one that came closest for Forge. He struck a crossbar within I think the first 12, 13 minutes.
Yeah.
And it kind of was like, okay, maybe Forge can at least make a good show for themselves. Fortunately, that was really all that we saw up until towards the end of the game. Monterrey really started to kind of just
they sort of stepped on his Sergio Ramos is watching him from the stands. You're like,
with Sergio Ramos watching from the stands, you're like, okay, Forge really are up against it in this one. And it did feel like at Monterrey, obviously with some stronger players in Leg 2, similar to what Pumas did. I mean, let's be honest, they just showed the gulf in class between one of the top Mexican sides and the top Canadian sides. And like, you have to be honest, we're not deluded. As much as we love the CPL on this show, we're not deluded. We understand that Mexican teams are better than CPL teams.
Quite early on, just the actual, like, the intelligence of the squad and how well put together they are and how well they play together. The fact that they were making the Forge players just sprint around the pitch, but they were gliding, moving around in their movements. They were conserving energy, keeping the ball. Their movements were quick when they needed to be. They relaxed, and Forge were just constantly having a chase. And you saw like players in the midfield just chasing. I mean, you mentioned like Kyle Becker's getting on a little while now, and it was that game really showed. It's like, oh god, he is human. Something like, is he slowing down? Because the quality of the team just forces Forge to just exhaust themselves in that first half.
Exactly, and I think it's just a case of, as good as Forge are, as great as we know of them in the league, they still have a long way to go before they can go up against one of the toughest oppositions in the competition, period. So it was still a pretty decent showing. I still feel like Forge can be proud of a lot of things that they showed. If if only they were able to finish their dinner, then maybe things could have been a little bit differently. I don't know if they would have been able to do what Cavalry did,
No,
but they could
but
have.
something to cling on to would have been nice, wouldn't it? To
Exactly
bring back, like,
some
so,
nice little memory to
like
write home
tangible.
about. Because 5-0 aggregate score. Don't know if that tells the whole story.
Yeah,
I think that's a
exactly.
little harsh on them. But again, if you don't score, then you're always going to be in a tough position to win any match.
Exactly.
So I think for Forge, that's a lot of good lessons learned for them ahead of the new season. And yeah, I'm excited to see for them what that will mean. And then I want to ask you this one last question on talking about the CONCACAF. Based on what you saw from Cavalry and based on what you saw from Forge, what are you expecting from both sides ahead of the upcoming CPL season? And did any of them surprise you?
Cavalry more of the same. Like, I just assume they'll be exactly the same team next year. I imagine. I mean, I imagine they're going to hope not to draw quite so many games at the beginning of the season, and put themselves in a better position from an earlier time. But they just they're so organized. They know what they're doing. They were one of the best teams last year, obviously winners in the playoffs. Like, they are a top quality team, and they're coming in and they've made some minor additions. They've got themselves rolling. They'll be they'll be fighting for both trophies again come the end of the season, no doubt. Forge, I've got my concerns about. I just think how many times can they have arguments with players, rotate things around, start a bit late. I'm concerned for them that Brian Wright isn't going to be the striker that they hope he's going to be, because he has a habit of being streaky at best, should we say. Tristan Borges is going to be absolutely massive for them this year. They're going to need him to be quality all season long again. There's a lot of changing around. I'm not sure how it always comes. I'm gonna look back at this and say, well, that was stupid. It's Forge, but at the same time, it's the same thing each year. I don't know how harmonious that whole group is every year when they go into a season. So if it doesn't fit perfectly right, then maybe they're not going to be quite as strong as they usually are. And the way they're putting this roster together at the moment, I have those little surprises about them. I'm sure that they'll go very quickly, but
as they do, because I was about to say, Mike, we have to learn our lesson at some point. We have to learn our lesson. We cannot keep doubting.
I just say each
Forge.
season, and then when it does happen, I say, I told you.
Yeah, it's basically throwing it against the wall in the dark until it sticks.
Yeah. How about you? Do you anything that's come surprised you from either of these teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Cavalry, it just shows similar to you. Like, they're just building stride for stride. They're just getting stronger and stronger. I think, the fact they lost Dan Klump was huge, and I think that was my biggest concern. But the game against, Pumas, even though they conceded 3 goals across the 2 matches, it still felt like they were able to hold their own defensively and withstand a lot of what Pumas was throwing at them. So I was really surprised by how well Callum and Kopsa did across the 2 games, especially in that first game. And then I feel like, Tobias Warchowski last season might not have been the best that we see from him. I'm thinking that maybe he'll just continue to get even better. And if he does, then I'd be surprised if he sticks around for the entirety of the 2025 season.
That's true. Yeah, that's
if he continues in that form. If he starts banging in goals early, he might get that Alejandro Diaz from Pacific 2021 treatment and get snapped up real quick halfway through the season. So for Cavalry, I see a lot of positives. And then for Forge, I mean, I still see a lot of what makes Forge amazing and what makes them so strong. But I do feel like, there's some things there that kind of show maybe there are signs of stagnation. Again, hard to judge because this is the first matches of the season. They're starting so much earlier than pretty much all of the other teams. Like, I'm pretty sure, by the time Forge had their second match, Halifax was just about to start their preseason. Like that's how ahead they are, and how much quicker they had to prepare for it. They didn't have as long as a break as some of the other teams. So I feel like I'm going to take these things with a grain of salt, but I wouldn't be surprised if they start to be a theme later this season. Nevertheless, I am not going to make a fool out of myself like I have done the last few seasons. I'm not going to say that this is the season when Forge crumble or Forge struggle. I'm going to see. Maybe reverse psychology will work. I have no idea, but I'm not. I'm going to say Forge are going to keep forging on. They're going to be the same. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm going to err on the side of caution. I'm not going to doubt them. I am not going to doubt them. At least not yet. Not yet. That might change, but for now, before the season started, I am pro Forge continuing to be Forge.
Yeah.
But that is it on the CONCACAF side of things. Hopefully you enjoyed those 4 matches, the little taste that we got from CPL action, because it's going to be a little while until we can
Another
see
break.
another little break until CPL starts again. We will talk about the opening fixtures in a little bit, but I want to talk about some of the transfer news that we got. Wasn't as much as we got when we were talking about it with Josh a couple of weeks ago in that episode, but we still got a couple of stories to break out. The biggest one, of course, is the signing of the CPL's all-time leading goal scorer, Terrence Campbell, going back home to BC, playing for Vancouver FC. Now, I'll be honest, this one has been in the pipeline for a while. I have been, I basically was told about this signing almost as soon, like almost maybe 3-4 days after their last game of the season, like shortly before playoffs and everything. Like I was like, this is in the works, and it was almost basically confirmed to me like before my trip to Calgary that Terrence Campbell was coming. So this has been in there for a while. This has been a signing that's been in the works. So I'm glad that it finally got announced.
Yeah.
With Terrence Campbell coming back to Vancouver. I have to admit something. The entire time that we've been talking about Terrence Campbell, especially with his injuries and everything the last season, how he hasn't really been doing anything. In my mind, he was 31. My shock when the announcement comes and I see that he's 26. It's just because it's felt like he's been in the CPL forever. He's been there since 2019. That's when he had his breakout year, and like the height of 2021. Like he's been there for so long. He's been like a CPL icon that I thought he was in his 30s already.
So yeah.
The guy's only 26 years old. The guy was like 19 when he broke out. I was just like, I knew that he wasn't like that. He broke out at 19 and everything, but like it didn't translate in my mind. I was like, oh, this guy's in his 30s. But the guy's only 26 years old and he's recovered from his injuries. And now I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This is actually could be a really good signing for Vancouver FC, and the pairing again of Terrence Campbell, Alejandro Diaz, similar, like the same dynamic duo that we saw tear it up in the CPL back in 2021. Like, I kind of came away with it better knowing the truth about who Terrence Campbell was than when I initially heard about all those months ago. So, like, I think this is a very shrewd signing from Vancouver FC. I mean, this is a player that obviously has shown he can score goals in the league, being the all-time leading scorer. And now Vancouver FC boast both all-time leading scorers in the CPL. Both of them have the same amount of regular season goals. The only reason why Terrence Campbell is ahead is because of playoff goals, which obviously Alejandro Diaz has not been able to add to since coming back to the league with Vancouver FC. So, I mean, a big signing. Do you think it'll be enough, Mike, for Vancouver to have Terrence Campbell and Alejandro Diaz to push them to the playoffs or even more in this upcoming season? Or do you still think that they still have a lot more to work on?
I mean, I think they do have a lot to work on still. Like, there's still so many question marks over Vancouver and how they're sorting themselves out off the pitch as well as on the pitch. I guess there's still a new team. They're still working towards creating their identity, like we've spoken about many times. But this is only this can only be seen as a step closer to working it out, and a step closer to becoming a playoff side. He's obviously, we've seen, like you say, we've seen his quality when fit, like the player he can be. It's going to be really important how they manage this this preseason, bringing him into the team. Look, things stopped working at Forge for him. Him and Jordan Hamilton had a terrible old time come the end of last season, and it was a sign that two of them needed new scenery around them. They needed a new squad. This is a place where he can go back to being. He's going to be a focal point. He gets to play, like you say, again with Alejandro Diaz. It's huge for them if they can get him fit and they can get him up to speed and working well within this squad. Then it's a win-win for everyone. It's just going to be very difficult to make sure that happens, I think, from someone who's had so many injuries and a quiet time last year.
Yeah, and I feel like they're banking on him being able to show those glimpses of his best back in 2021, 2022. Real question is, will he actually be able to?
Yeah. It's a lot of pressure on him. I mean, you'll get to know him more than I will, obviously, when you get to he'll no doubt be front and center every pre-match and post-match press conference for the first bit. You get to know how he'll be able to cope with that, as like from these injuries to then being thrown in as a savior for Vancouver to like, you're the missing piece we needed. That's going to be tough, but you'll get to follow along next year.
Yeah. No, and I feel like obviously he's brought in to score a bunch of goals and get that pairing with Alejandro Diaz. And as much as a fantastic signing, I do think it is. It's not the marquee signing that I think they really need. It's one that they'll definitely enjoy, hopefully. But I'm looking at defense and midfield primarily, and thinking, where are they going to get those players? Because Rocco Romeo left. Renan Garcia left. You have gaping holes in the fence and in the DM, where they have made no signings really. Like they had the young signing, the 17-year-old exceptional young player that signing. Obviously, what was Emmerich Fotzing. Great. We love to see young players come into it. Fantastic. We saw the Grady McDonald sale. They're continuing that football factory thing. Love it. But what about now? That's great for in a few seasons. What about now? You need a starting center back. You need an experienced center back. You need or two. You need
a few center mids.
A few center mids, since you let Robbins go and you let Renan Garcia go. Bitar left. Like,
you've got Vasco Fry. That's it.
Yeah, their squad's looking
and he's suspended every few weeks. So.
Yeah. Unfortunately. But you have you have a pretty thin squad right now, and you're looking at where can they really improve? Where do they need that help? They already had Alejandro Diaz, right? And he scored a bunch of goals for them. He was a top goal scorer. He had, I think, 10 goals. The issue was the defense.
Yeah.
And the midfield, but especially the defense last season. It wasn't necessarily that you weren't getting the goals. That was as well a little bit. But it was more the silly goals you were conceding. I would think that, obviously, it might be in the works. And this might be just like a long con from Vancouver FC waiting until later in the season to make all of their announcements. But I would feel like if you really want to show that you're moving on from last season, you're going to improve, make those kind of marquee signings in the defense and in the midfield where they're desperately needed. Not, the luxury of being able to say we have the two top leading goal scorers, fantastic. But unless they score you 7 goals a game, you're going to concede 6 if you have no defense.
Yeah, you
So
can't expect Cavalry to do it every year.
exactly, you can't
Yeah.
like that guy
Week
is
in, week out, year on year.
he was struggling week in and week out as captain, as goalie, as a player in general.
Mm,
Like they need more. And that's what the biggest thing for
yeah,
me is like what I'm waiting for is like, okay, fantastic signing from an attacking point of view, but I need more. I need
that's
more to feel confident that you guys are able to improve from what happened last season.
and that's the big thing. Like you mentioning, like this deal has been in the pipeline for so long. The fact that nothing else has come out around it, like there is that from the outside looking in and not knowing anything about the day to day of what the staff are doing, you do then get that worry of, well, how much effort have you put into getting this? Like, where is the effort on all these other areas? Like, has this taken up so much of your time? Because other signings could have been made at this point. Like, the other teams, yeah, not every team has got a full roster. Like, there are still deals going on and people are still looking for players, but none more than Vancouver.
Yep, exactly. No, because this is their first real signing. You see, most of the other teams either have still a good core from last season, or
Yeah,
have already made like 2 or 3 signings.
yeah, exactly.
And Vancouver FC
Mm.
have their exceptional young talent, and now Terran Campbell.
Yeah,
Good start, little late. I need
yeah,
more. That's kind
and
of
that's
my
it.
mentality going forward.
Yeah, and that's the issue that's going to happen. Like, yeah, that they all may band together really quickly, and everything will be rosy in a 2 months' time. But Ashton Gotby hasn't got the reputation of making sure everyone's happy and all on singing on the same hymn sheet, like from a start. So that's the worry. Like, yeah, it is going to be thrown together, but they're going to be this sort of group of randoms that during the season they're having to patch together.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what happens with Vancouver FC moving forward. But that was the big transfer news in the last couple of weeks. We also have some other ones. Obviously, we had a couple to the teams that played in Concacaf, and we saw them in Concacaf. We saw Ben Payton play for Forge FC, the younger brother of Harry Payton, who both played for Ross County in Scotland and both have played in Scotland. I'm pretty sure he's coming off of he had, I don't know if it was last season or something like that, but he had a pretty nasty like ACL injury that
Okay.
I think it was 2023, not 2024, but he had a pretty nasty ligament injury that affected. Obviously, he was out for 2023, affected his 2024, and so now joining Forge, he looks pretty decent. I think in the games against Monterrey, he had like one shot that look kind of close from like off of a corner phase. Haven't seen too much of him to fully kind of like gauge what kind of player he is. But signing a Canadian player from that played in Scotland for Ross County is always a good
Yeah.
signing to bring in somebody that has that kind of top level experience in Scotland.
And Ross County famously once had 3 goalkeepers named Ross. Just to throw out that.
Really?
Yeah.
Surnames
Yeah,
or
just
first
about
name?
2 seasons ago, all 3 of their goalkeepers signed on were either first name Ross or surname Ross.
Wow. They really like to be on
Big
brand.
club. Big club.
Big club.
But in all seriousness, like the league is fantastic. Like Dario Zanata's come from there. We've seen how he's took a while and had like moments. So like it's not going to be okay, this is an SPL player. Like Ross County they struggle. they do struggle. I think being in the CPL will probably be a good step for him. Like it's going to be a different type of football. It's very. I don't want to cast aspersions on the league. I'm going to say like that. I don't mean to be rude about the league, but I think like for a wide player looking into this league, I think coming from an injury and getting out of that style of football where you're coming up against Celtic, Rangers, or teams like that, big budgets. Like he's coming into a team where he's in one of the bigger budget teams. That could be a good move, which might make it quite impressive. He's got obviously came up through the ranks at Blackburn as well, and like relatively decent academies and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how he adapts.
Yeah, exactly. I think, if Becker is needing some more help, bringing in a player like Ben Patton, hopefully, having him and Jensen as options off the bench, hopefully will help Forge in the midfield department. The other signing for Cavalry was Kaniga Elva, who fans might know because he's featured for the national team, and he was sort of like a stalwart Canadian player in the German divisions. In I believe it was mostly in the second division. He was a player that looked pretty decent. I remember back in my FIFA days, I would when I was looking for like Canadian players that had some potential to bring into my squad and try to promote uh, Canadian players and all of that. He was someone that I looked towards, and I was like, "Oh, this guy could be a decent player." Since then, like he's been around for a little bit. I think Ingolstadt was the biggest club that he played for. Now comes back to Cavalry, and again kind of fits into that mold that we've been saying that they've been needing at times, which is that kind of Willie Accio, Gauthier Antigny kind of fast, dynamic winger kind of thing for them. And we got to see a little bit of Elva in the Concacaf games. And again, same thing with Patton. Looked pretty decent in the short stint that we saw of him. Looked kind of lively, had little flashes. And obviously not enough to make like a full-blooded judgment about, but nevertheless, seemed like, okay, this is a pretty smart acquisition from Cavalry, and hopefully somebody that has played for Ingolstadt and I think started in his youth career for Stuttgart. So
okay, so yeah, I mean that Bundesliga too, they've got some very good teams. Like there's the academy system, and that everything is very professional. It's a really good standard. Like so, it's taking all of what he's learned there to bring into Cavalry is going to be like really really useful. And they've got that great front line, but if you can have those rotations and backups and different like players for different moments in games, that's only going to make Cavalry even stronger.
Yeah, exactly. And now the fact that he is in Cavalry is Canadian, counts as Canadian, though I think now he switched to St. Lucia for his national team, but it still counts as domestic. Only will help bolster them to be able to kind of look into different areas for those goals and those assists to be able to help out. So it's not just Toby. The fact that Jay's doing well, Jay Herdman, obviously Ali Musi, have more options like that off the bench is only going to help them more and more to be able to defend that title and try to go for that double.
Exactly. When you've got depth, you can rest the player every so you're not risking Ali Musi injuries, and when you're having like if you've got those moments where you can bring him off after an hour rather than leaving him on the 90.
Exactly. So yeah, we'll see what these pair signings do for the top two teams. Lastly, let's talk about some of the young players that have come into the league. Some that we have seen before and some that we have not. The main two that I want to talk about is Matteo Schiavoni, who before played for Forge FC, coming into Pacific, who also signed another good player in Pedro Macau, who is not a youngster, actually quite an established player at center back, Portuguese, who we talked about with Pacific needed him. But Pacific bringing in this youngster, Matteo Schiavoni and Pedro Macau, they look like they're making some pretty decent moves in the transfer window as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we haven't seen Mercado, but they're touting him as like this defensive leader at the back that's going to be great. I mean, if you've got Ali and Dom back, you're going for a difficult time losing TMG a year after losing Didic. So there's big changes needed to be made, and we'll see how he fits in, if you can build up a good relationship. I think Schiavoni's great. Like they need new central midfield. Like they needed players added into that. They've got some players with some quality, but they needed a little mix of style of player in there, I think. And obviously they've made their changes, let some players go. So it gives them something else. They still need a striker. But the rest of the squad, as opposed to the other BC side, is looking pretty decent. Like on paper, they've got depth now. They've got players in different areas where you're interested to see where it will happen for them. Hopefully it works. We don't know. It's still just on paper, but they've got that done. So at least they're in a position where they've gone into their pre-season with it start yesterday. And they've got a relatively full squad ready to start work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's very important for Pacific because they want to make sure that they hit the ground running. You know, Spain, they were able to do that last season, but then they faltered off. They want to make sure that they can build some consistency again early on, but this time maintain it throughout
Yeah.
the season. And, defensively within them, they were amazing. Now if they can
Yeah.
get Mikado involved as well, that'll be huge for them. And then I'm excited for Schiavone as well because I saw glimpses of him when he played for Forge. He had that really good match against Vancouver FC here in BC that kind of, perked my ears up. And I think he can be a pretty decent prospect for them. Really depends on the way that James Merriman wants to rotate the squad. But with these young players that he has coming in, I think that he'll have quite a bit of option to fill up the under 21 minutes and just play young players in general. Yeah, I'm looking at Pacific FC with some level of optimism, definitely more than Vancouver right now.
There's a lot more intrigue about them rather than where's the goals coming from, as it was last year.
Very true. Very, very true. And lastly, just really want to quickly mention the move that just happened, which was Alessandro Biello going to Halifax. For Canadian national team fans that follow the youth teams, they will know about Alessandro Biello. He was the captain of the men's under 17 team last year, and is a very good player and has been for the last year or two for the youth national teams. He is the son of Mauro Biello, the former Montreal and former Canadian men's national team interim head coach, and is currently the assistant head coach. He's helping Jesse Marsh out in the national team. So obviously, as a dad in high places, but he's still a quality player. Not accusing him of nepotism whatsoever.
You get that? We haven't done that.
But he is a good young player. I really liked him in the youth national team, and if there's any team that I feel like you can really develop as a young player aside from against Vancouver FC, Halifax is a really good option as well. I feel like Halifax has shown that with young players, they can help develop them. Again, it'll be interesting to see how he fits into the makeup under this kind of new team, this new look Halifax squad, because they did let go a lot of their players from the season before under Patrice Geyser, and how he fits into Geyser's very, very specific style of play.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I think coming in as a young player, you're gonna probably take a little bit of time. They've obviously got quality in that squad already who know the way that Patrice Geyser wants to play. So we'll probably see flashes of him at first every so often, but it seems like he's got that quality. You think he could end up making a big impression on the league, like eventually. But yeah, he's got some very good players to compete with as well as learn with.
Yeah, and I think it'll be good for him in that way. I think that
definitely.
always, as a young player, you want to be pushed to be better, and that's how you grow. And I think with somebody like Patrice Geyser, who has a history of doing that, I think it'll do him a world of good. But that is it for the transfer news. We're going to end off quickly now talking about the fixtures, both of the Canadian Championship and of the CPL. We got the opening fixtures for the CPL, the opening weekend, as well as obviously the other schedules, the rest of the schedule, I should say. But let's talk about the home openers. The first one that we see, the very first game of the season, will be Ottawa hosting Halifax to open the season. It's going to be a great match, hopefully. Ottawa, we saw they opened the season last year as well, I believe, against York United. Yes, because that was the game with Austin Ritchie having the absolutely spectacular miss.
Yeah.
that still, like, if it was first game, first like real showing, and still sticks in the mind. But that is the first match, 2 p.m. Eastern time, April 5th. Ottawa open up the CPL against Halifax Wanderers. And then we got probably the biggest game of the weekend. Once again, we have another Forge against Cavalry to open it off. They clearly like the formula in CPL on how they opened up the league last year, with Ottawa being the first one and then having Forge v Cavalry be in the opening weekend as well. So another rematch of the CPL final, same as last year. But still a fantastic match. Yeah, I mean, if it ain't broke, if it ain't broke, why change it? Exactly. I'm not gonna judge. Good marketing plan. But it's still a very good match. Obviously, I love any CPL fan loves to watch Forge against Cavalry, even if it is a hate watch, even if it's because they don't like the team. It's still the two biggest clubs in the league going at it. So it's going to be a great one. That's the second game at 4:30 p.m. ET on April 5th. And then closing out on April 5th, the opening day, is Pacific against Valor on the island. Another, again, I'm pretty sure Pacific also hosted their first game of the home opener.
They spend a lot of time in BC before while the weather's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Taking advantage of the BC weather. Very smart. Very smart. And then lastly, on Sunday, on April 6th, Vancouver hosts York United. And no doubt I will be there for that one too. So those are the opening matches from the weekend.
Can I throw in? I like it because I think Ottawa and Halifax are two of the bigger teams that have the most to prove.
Yeah.
After last season didn't go to plan for either of them in different ways. And then to finish it off with Vancouver versus York, like, we have no idea who's going to be at the starting 11 for Vancouver, and York United in this whole new setup. Like, where's this going to go? Like, I think it's quite a good way to start and finish the opening weekend. I think they're the two best ties to open and close.
Yeah,
that's my thoughts.
I agree. No, I agree. I feel, especially with York United under Mauro Stacchio, what's going to look like, and then Vancouver FC, who the hell is going to start for them? Like, what is that lineup actually going to look like? Like, has the most intrigue, I guess.
Darren Campbell's actually playing left back, so
you never know with Afshin Gombe. You never know what he might pull out. But yeah, no, I like it. Obviously, Forge Cavalry. Some people might say it's an overplayed fixture, and it might be correct. But personally, I still love it. I still love
still
watching.
A good game. Yeah,
it's still a good game. It's the two best going at it. Like, you're always going to want to tune in. And then Pacific versus Valor, I think that'll be an interesting one too, because you have Pacific that are like seemingly making the right moves and everything, and Valor also making some signings along the way, kind of adding new names. Their usual tactic of signing people, I have no idea who they are.
Just
random people from random corners of the world.
Yeah.
But I think it'll show, especially for Valor, because they don't have to wait as long as they did last season for their home opener, but they do have to wait till the end of the month to get their first home game. It's going to be interesting to see how they deal with shorter but still a little bit of an away trip.
I think my biggest thing for Valor is watching Rocco Romeo go from Vancouver, where we said, he needs that senior centre-back partner, to Valor, where he's probably going to need that senior. Like, he's just goes out of the frying pan into the fire sort of thing.
Yep. Definitely a parallel move for him. It's just basically a change of environment, but about the same situation. But yeah, all four matches look good. Let us know which match you are the most excited for of the opening matches. We would love to know. But to close out, let's quickly now chat about Canadian Championship, because we finally got the dates for when the Canadian Championship was going to finally come out. We got the opening matches, same format for those that maybe didn't watch last season or just tuning into the league in Canadian soccer now. It has the exact same format as they did last season, where the first round is a single leg knockout before they move on to a I guess you can call it quarterfinal, because it kind of changes up a quarterfinal, two-legged tie. Then there's the giant reseed before the semifinals, where it's basically another draw, and then the final, and it's spread out once again over the course of the entire domestic season, essentially. So the opening games, the first game is once again actually Atletico Ottawa. They love to open competitions up on the 29th of April against Scrosopi in the capital. In Scrosopi FC, the League One Ontario team. That is April 29th at 7 p.m. Then we have Toronto FC versus CF Montreal, the blockbuster first round.
Get one of them out.
On the 30th at 7 p.m. That's what everyone's saying. Get one of them out so we can get the CPL, teams a chance. As you'll see as I go through this, Vancouver Whitecaps will not be involved because they get an automatic bye to the next round, them being champions. But unlike last season, the runners-up do not. And that's why we get Toronto FC against CF Montreal in the first round. Then we have to wait until the following week on May 6th, where we get a triple match day in the Canadian Championship. York United against FC Laval at 7 p.m. at York Line Stadium. Cavalry FC hosting Edmonton Scottish United SC. Not a name that rolls off the tongue, but still. No. They faced them in Atco Field again at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we get a BC Derby to end off the day, which you could say probably the second biggest match behind Toronto FC and CF Montreal. Pacific FC versus Vancouver FC, 7 p.m. Pacific at Starlight Stadium. Not 100% sure if I am going to make the trip, but I will try my best to be there for that one. And then the following day on Wednesday, we have the last two matches of Leg 1, and that is Forge FC against Halifax Wanderers at now Hamilton Stadium. It's not Tim Hortons Field anymore because that contract is up. Now it's just called Hamilton Stadium at 7 p.m. And Valor FC against TSS Rovers at 7 p.m. Central. That's one that I'm going to be very excited for, the very underrated one, because fans that did not see the game 2 years ago when the Rovers hosted Valor, they had a historical win there, so they'll see if they can do the same this time away from home at Princess Auto Stadium. I know, Mike, unlike many other fans, you're going to be hoping not. But a lot of people are going to be hoping to see another upset from the Rovers in that one. A lot of matches to open up, obviously, excluding TFC against Montreal. Which one are you the most excited for?
Probably the Forge Halifax, like wanting to see who really pushes on, because if my memory serves, they'll play the Toronto Montreal winners. And Forge obviously did very well last year against MLS sides in the cup. So that one I'm keen to see where both of those teams are at when that comes around.
Very true. Very true. I feel like, especially Forge are going to be wanting to make sure that they get another bite of the cherry and try to get some revenge there. But I think that I would be surprised to see if another League One Ontario team makes it through. But, as memories serves well, the last 2 years, there's been at least one League One team that's gone past the first round. I got to say, looking at the fixtures, you got to say it's probably FC Laval.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because we don't know York, really.
Because exactly, we don't really know what's going with York, Ottawa. As much as they might have fumbled last season towards the end, they still have a very, very good squad. And then Cavalry are Cavalry. So you think Laval probably have the biggest chances at being the, surprise. Though, obviously, TSS Rovers, I would love if they would beat Valor, and that would be my pick for who I would want and predict to move on to the next round. And then you have the incredible quarterfinal of the Whitecaps hosting the Rovers at BC Place. And
that's what the Whitecaps are after, because they're terrified of Valor, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, their biggest worry, biggest concern in the Canadian Championship. But yeah, Rovers would go to the BC Place, and then at Swangard Stadium, the former home of the Whitecaps, the Rovers would be hosting the Whitecaps there too for the second leg. So that
That'd
would
be
be a
really cool.
massive tie that goes through. So unfortunately, Mike, that's who I will be rooting for in that one. Will be the Rovers, just for that story. I get to see more Canadian Championship matches in BC. But yeah, those are the matches for the Canadian Championship first round. Once again, let us know which one are you most excited for and who you think might go all the way, and if we will see a new champion. Whitecaps are going under a lot of change, a lot of questions around the Whitecaps. I could fill another whole hour talking about what's going on with the Whitecaps. So it's definitely a chance for a new winner to be crowned. And will we finally see a CPL team be named the best team in Canada?
It's the best chance at that for a while, isn't it? Really, like
Yeah,
now you're getting rid of one early doors. Let's see how we
exactly. I think this is going to be the best chance the CPL teams have, or at least have had, to get one of them at least in the final, but definitely as champion. But that is it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening to our 100th podcast episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. And hopefully if you enjoyed the last 99 we have made as well. And hopefully you'll enjoy the next 100 or so that we will make too. But make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, so you can give us your thoughts on this week's episode. You can talk about all 100 episodes if you really want to. I don't know if you want to waste that much tech space. But yeah, let us know what you thought about it, and all the fixtures and the news and the review that we did on the Concacaf. Let us know how we did. But until next time, I'm Felipe Ojeho.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC. Signing up.